Flow is a PhD-level treatment that stays disciplined, non-clinical, and phenomenological, treating agoraphobic distance not as pathology, but as an intentional spatial existential strategy for solace. 1. Reframing agoraphobia, from disorder to distance logic. In its clinical framing, agoraphobia is described as fear of open spaces or public exposure. This description is insufficient and in many cases inaccurate. What is more precisely occurring is a breakdown in tolerable relational density, a failure of the subject-world interface under excessive observational load. At an ontological level, agoraphobic distance is not a fear of space, but a rejection of compulsory co-presence. It is a refusal of environments in which one is seen without consent, interpreted without reciprocity, and acted upon without relational buffering. The subject does not flee space. The subject withdraws from forced participation in unmanaged relational fields. 2. Vanishing as an ontological act. To vanish in this context is not disappearance through negation, but disappearance through de-indexing. Vanishing operates as removal from the gaze economy, social, institutional, algorithmic, exit from narrative capture, being continually described, evaluated, or instrumentalized, suspension of demand, no expectation to respond, perform, or explain. Philosophically, this aligns with what Simone Weil called décrochage, the act of stepping aside so that reality may exist without one's forced insertion into it. Vanishing is not annihilation of the self, it is cessation of unnecessary self-projection. 3. Agoraphobic distance as a solace gradient. Solace is not achieved through comfort alone. It requires gradient control, the ability to regulate how much of the world arrives at the self and at what velocity. Agoraphobic distance functions as a solace gradient by introducing spatial attenuation, fewer bodies, fewer signals, fewer expectations. Temporal dilation, time stretches when no one is waiting for response. Semantic quieting, meaning is no longer imposed from outside. Distance here is not emptiness, it is low-noise coherence. This is why certain environments recur across cultures as places of refuge. Deserts, high plateaus, tundra, oceans, monasteries, watchtowers, remote cabins. Each offers agoraphobic distance without isolation, space large enough to dissolve social pressure, yet structured enough to support orientation. Disappearing without being lost. A critical distinction must be made between being lost and becoming unlocatable. To disappear in the sense relevant to solace is to become functionally unaddressable, not disoriented. This requires a stable internal axis, ritual, routine, craft, attention, a bounded perimeter, geography, rules of contact, and a minimal but sufficient interface with necessity, water, shelter, food, signal. The person who disappears well does not drift. They anchor inwardly while decoupling outwardly. 5. Solace as non-witnessed existence. Much contemporary suffering arises from the assumption that existence must be witnessed, validated, recorded, optimized. Agoraphobic distance allows for non-witnessed being, a mode of existence in which nothing needs to be proven, nothing needs to be signaled, nothing needs to be legible. This is not loneliness. It is ontological rest. The self is permitted to exist at subsymbolic levels, sensation without commentary, action without performance, thought without publication. 6. The ethics of withdrawal. Withdrawal is often moralized as failure or avoidance. This is an ethical error. There exists an ethics of right distance. When proximity degrades coherence, distance becomes a duty. When exposure dissolves agency, withdrawal becomes care. When participation destroys meaning, absence preserves it. Disappearing, in this sense, is an ethical refusal of distortion. 7. Solace as reversible vanishing. Finally, true solace does not trap the subject in disappearance. It establishes reversibility. Agoraphobic distance is successful when return is possible but not compelled, contact is elective rather than imposed, presence is chosen, not coerced. Solace is thus not permanent exile, but a holding pattern, a quiet orbital state in which the self regains shape before re-engaging. Closing synthesis. Agoraphobic distance, when understood outside pathology, is a spatial intelligence of care. Vanishing is not collapse, but strategic silence. Disappearing is not loss, but temporary exemption from the world's demands. Solace emerges not from being held, but from being left alone in the right way, at the right distance, for the right duration.